So 13 years ago this month, my childhood friend Skylar was unalived by her two best friends. The night of July 5th, 2012, Skylar snuck out of her parents' house to go on a joyride with her two best friends, Sheila and Rachel. Skylar snuck out around midnight and she met them in Sheila's car. So where we're from in Morgantown, West Virginia is practically on the border of West Virginia and Pennsylvania, so they went on a joyride to PA. So they're in the car for about an hour and Skylar thinks that they're just smoking and going on a joyride, but that was not what happened at all. About an hour into them driving to PA, they stop the car. They all decide to hop out of the car to smoke. So they're all three out of the car, they're just hanging out. And Skylar said that she wanted to go back in the car to grab her jacket just because she was cold. So Skylar turns around to go back into the car and Sheila and Rachel look at each other and then they pulled out that Sheila provided, looked at each other and they said, okay, 1, 2, 3. They proceeded to charge after Skylar and her over 50 times. If that wasn't bad enough, Skylar's last word ever on this planet, which this literally breaks my heart still to this day, was why. So after they unalived her, they wanted to bury her. They got out a shovel, but the ground was too hard, so they decided to take her body, drag it somewhere in the woods, throw a bunch of leaves and twigs, etc. on top of her. And as if that's not bad enough, what the two of them did next, quite literally sociopathic, psychotic, just outright disgusting.
This photo is so terrifying because of what you can't see in the image. What's going on in this photo will make you physically sick. It was May 1977 in Eugene, Oregon, when 20-year-old Colleen Stan was hitchhiking to a friend's house in California. Now, she didn't actually have her own car or way of getting to her friend's birthday in California, so she was just flagging down cars like she'd done many times before. And a couple of cars actually stopped, but Colleen declined the lift because she got a bit of a bad vibe about the people stopping. Then one car stopped where she actually felt comfortable having a lift from these people. It was a man, his wife, and a baby in the back seat. She had no idea that when she climbed into the vehicle, she'd just entered a living nightmare. Inside the car was Cameron Hooker with his wife Janice and their child. And despite her initially feeling comfortable, she soon got a very bad feeling about this couple. Cameron started taking the back roads and just acting really suspicious. He said at this point something in her head was screaming at her to jump out of the car, but unfortunately she didn't listen. It was about 20 minutes later that Cameron actually pulled the car over and Janice and the child got out and seemed to wander down to a lake. Cameron got in the back seat at that point and pulled a knife out on Colleen. He then grabbed essentially a torture box out of his vehicle and placed this over her head. Now, I'm claustrophobic, so this is my worst nightmare. The box was handmade and had essentially been made to prevent any light or fresh air getting inside. He threatened her not to make a scene and drove her back to the couple's house. This poor girl had no idea she'd been captured to become an slave for the couple. When they got her back home, they put her in the basement and hung her up by her wrists. Cameron then beat her and viciously attacked her, and she was obviously terrified for her life. Now, Cameron and his wife, it turns out, had come to some sick arrangement that she was gonna let him do this to an innocent woman and just kind of keep her as a slave to satisfy his sick desires. That very first night after attacking her, they left her blindfolded and hung by her wrists while they had S underneath her. Colleen was in agony and petrified that she was going to be killed. Cameron then decided to store Colleen like an actual literal dead body. He locked that original head contraption around her head and kept her body imprisoned in another coffin-like box. And Cameron absolutely brainwashed this poor girl. Right from day one, he kept her scared for her life. He told her that he was part of this like bigger organization called the Company, and they were going to be watching her every second of every day. He forced her to sign this contract saying she agreed to be his slave forever. And he basically said that if you don't sign the contract, I'm going to kill you and your family. So what choice did she have? She was tortured and locked inside this box for 23 hours a day. She wasn't even allowed to be referred to as her real name. He just called her Kay. It was so dehumanizing. She wasn't allowed to talk without permission. She had to go to the toilet in a bucket. Now, he didn't have intercourse initially with her fully because his wife disagreed with this for some reason, because she was jealous, but he was allowed to R her with objects. Make it make sense. And this couple seemingly carried on as normal in every other aspect of their life. They obviously had kidnapped this slave in their basement, but they just carried on as normal, even having another baby. As the years went on, and I mean years and years and years of this horrific torture, Colleen was gradually kind of given more freedom. Now, this really reminds me of the JC Lee Dugard case. If you know about that case, you'll know exactly what I mean. If you haven't listened to my podcast episode about that, I would really highly recommend it. You can find it on The Bourne Investigation on Apple and Spotify. So Colleen was essentially allowed to go out for small walks and do things like that as the years went on. And eventually she was actually allowed to visit her family in 1981. This might sound really weird, but her poor family presumed that she'd been captured by a cult or something. She'd been brainwashed, which essentially she had, but not in the way that they thought. She'd obviously just disappeared and then come back and wanted to reconnect with them, but they had no idea she was being held captive. Cameron even went with her to visit her family and posed as her boyfriend. Bear in mind, Colleen at this point thought that there was a big organisation called The Company watching her every move, and they would kill her family if she told them the truth. Family actually didn't want to upset her or frighten her away. They really were just savouring every moment that they could get with Colleen. They even took a photo of Cameron and Colleen together. I bet when it all came out after years later, they would just absolutely kick themselves. I mean, obviously in this photo, they very much do look like a happy couple. Nobody had any idea the true sick secrets that lay beneath this photo. She was then taken back to Cameron's home and once again held captive, using a bowl for the toilet, being arsed repeatedly. It was just absolutely foul. And Cameron didn't stick to his promise to his wife not to ar Colleen with his pee, because shock horror, turns out your husband that abducted a woman at knife point and kept her as an S-slave in the basement wasn't the most trustworthy partner. Now finally in 1984 there was a bit of a breakthrough for Colleen. There was a turning point. She'd gradually been given more freedom, as I said, and Cameron had even let her get a job. I think she was working as a maid in a hotel. Cameron told his wife that he wanted to make Colleen his other wife, his second wife if you will. It was only at this point that she became really jealous and put her foot down and said no. Janice ended up breaking down and telling Colleen the whole truth. She said that she herself had been brainwashed by Cameron since she was just 15 years old. Colleen called Cameron from a payphone after work, I believe. They weren't actually obviously in the house together, and she told him she was leaving him, and he broke down crying. But still, Colleen didn't go to the police at this point. She was honestly just happy to be rid of him, to see the back of him. Until months later, when Janice actually decided to call the police on her own husband, that this whole sordid secret came out. And there was more. Before Colleen was snatched, Cameron had kidnapped, tortured and murdered a 19-year-old girl. This was Marie Spanhake, who'd gone missing from Chico in California in 1976. Janice told police how he'd strangled her to death, and the couple both buried her body in a shallow grave. However, due to them not being able to actually find the girl's remains, they were actually never charged for this. Cameron was given 104 years in prison, but is apparently up for parole very soon.
It took 38 years, but justice finally came for him. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Barbara Villarreal. Viewer discretion is advised. Barbara Villarreal was actually born in Indiana, and it's where she spent most of her life. She was a part of a large and very close-knit family. She had what they described as a very simple and very happy childhood. She was a smart and sweet and kind woman, and her family really was her entire life. Every single Sunday, every single holiday, they would have, big family get-togethers. Eventually, she would meet her husband, this man here, Domingo Diaz Villarreal, and the two of them lived in Garland, Texas, when all of this occurred. It was November 7th, 1986, here in their home. Barbara's husband calls 911 in a panic to state that he believes his wife is dead. There was blood everywhere, and eventually once, fire and rescue arrived, they determined that she was no longer alive. A 27-year-old Barbara had been stabbed to death, and that very night, they arrested her husband and actually was beginning the process of charging him with her murder. However, those charges were short-lived, and they determined that he actually had absolutely nothing to do with her murder, and so he was released and all charges against him were dropped. Then, unfortunately, Barbara's case goes cold very quickly, and the mystery of who could have done something like this to her remained a mystery for nearly 38 years. It would be thanks to advancements in DNA technology that finally captured the killer. They processed everything from her case that could have potentially had DNA on it, and they were able to build up a DNA profile, one that was not hers and one that was not her husband's. Her husband, by the way, died himself in 1988. So using genetic genealogy, they found their guy. 86-year-old Librorio Canales. I may have said his name wrong and I apologize. It was his DNA that was found at the murder scene. And did he know her? Were they even acquainted? Well, very much so. He was Barbara's brother-in-law, her husband's brother. Apparently, he was never considered a suspect back then. Or if he was, they never had any evidence at that point to arrest him. Once he was arrested and presented with the evidence of the DNA, he admitted he did it. He confessed to killing her. He would end up pleading guilty to her murder, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And, with him being 86 years old at the time of his arrest in 2024, he will die in prison. The why, they don't know. It doesn't sound like he's really given him a reason as to why he did it. But he did it all the same, and that's all that matters in the end. And so finally, after 38 years, Barbara finally got the justice she rightfully deserved.
The abduction and murder of Sierra Joggin is a case that will forever scare me, not only because of the way she was found, but because it uncovered a barn of horrors in a small community owned by a local man with a history of abducting women, and the fact that this could have all been prevented had this sick man stayed in prison like he was supposed to. Sierra Joggin was 20 years old when she mysteriously disappeared on July 19th, 2016. She was on summer break from the University of Toledo and was staying with her parents at their home on County Road 6 in Metamora, Ohio. That evening, Sierra was at her boyfriend Josh's house, not super far away, when she decided that she should probably start heading home. So at around 6:45 p.m., Sierra left on her purple bicycle with Josh riding alongside her on his motorcycle. He wanted to make sure that she got home safe, even though it really wasn't that far away. But once they got on to County Road 6, Sierra insisted that she would be okay to ride the rest of the way home alone and told him to go home. So Josh kissed her and told her he loved her, and also told her to text him once she got home. But Sierra never made it home, and this was the last time she was ever seen alive. Later that night, when she failed to return home, and after Josh realized he couldn't get a hold of her on the phone, Sierra was reported missing to the police. As it was getting dark out, police made a terrifying discovery. Not even a mile away from her home, police found Sierra's bike deep inside of a cornfield just off of County Road 6, not far from where she was last seen by her boyfriend. Surrounding her bike were a ton of items that didn't belong to her, including a pair of men's sunglasses, a screwdriver, and a set of fuse boxes. Investigators described the scene as really eerie, and it made the hair on the back of their necks stand up, because not only did they find these odd items, but they also found signs of a massive struggle. They found motorcycle tracks through the cornfield, as well as broken corn stalks, but they also found corn stalks that were covered in blood. Police immediately closed down the road because this was a clear abduction, and they quickly brought in the FBI for assistance. Together, they tried tracking her location through her Fitbit and her phone, and it did provide them with a ping several miles away from where her bike was found. But this didn't prove to be a good lead because they still couldn't locate Sierra. One thing that they did find nearby, though, is incredibly disturbing, and it was a helmet with a bloody handprint on it. Authorities then started focusing on her boyfriend Josh, not only because he was the last person to be with her before she disappeared, but also because he was riding his motorcycle that day, and police did find motorcycle tracks in the cornfield. But police were able to quickly rule him out based on evidence found at the crime scene, specifically his helmet that he had with him, which obviously wasn't the one used in Sierra's abduction. That and the fact that he was super cooperative and allowed them to search whatever they needed, and Sierra's family even said that Josh would never hurt her. So then a massive search was launched involving local authorities and the FBI, and everyone was pretty focused on the cornfields, but police also started knocking on doors in the neighborhood to see if anyone heard or saw anything. Police specifically wanted to knock on the home of James Worley, who also lived on County Road 6, just like Sierra. In fact, they pretty much lived right down the road from each other. They said they kind of just had this hunch to knock on his door, and when he answered, he immediately began acting suspicious. James started oversharing a bunch of really self-incriminating details, like how he was riding his motorcycle that day in the same area, but it had broken down in the cornfield. Then James started listing off several items that he just so happened to lose in the cornfield, which included some sunglasses, a screwdriver, and, you guessed it, some fuse boxes. This kind of made the detective's jaw drop, because at this point in time, none of that information had been released to the public. So the fact that he just blatantly said that, it seemed pretty clear that he was involved. James also told authorities that when he had broken down out there in the cornfield, he found 2 bikes and decided to take one, which would explain why his fingerprints are probably on them. He then looks them in the eyes and says, quote, "I didn't steal anything or kill anyone." end quote. So because of how sinister that entire encounter was, police decided to run a background check on James, and what they found is horrifying. In July of 1990, James was arrested and convicted for the assault and abduction of another woman named Robin Gardner. The circumstances surrounding that case are eerily similar to Sierra's. That day, Robin was riding her bike when James ambushed her and hit her with his truck. He then got out, struck her over the head, and put her in handcuffs. He then held a screwdriver to her neck, telling her that he would kill her if she screamed. As he was trying to force her into his truck, Robin somehow luckily escaped. He was arrested and charged with her abduction and sentenced to possibly 10 years in prison, but he was released early after just 3 years, and he was actually released because he petitioned himself. He then went to prison again in 2000 for drug and firearm charges, but again, he was released early due to his own petition. After this, he was put in mandated therapy, and in one session, he told his therapist that he had learned from each abduction that he had done, and the next one he was going to bury. So this was definitely enough information to begin searching James' property, and on his property, police found a barn that would later become known as the Barn of Horrors. Inside the barn, police found a big green chest with a bunch of women's underwear in it, some of which were bloody. They also found restraints and a carpet-lined freezer that was stained with blood that he had buried on his property. Police then found blood on his motorcycle and zip tie restraints and a ski mask in his truck. Sierra was nowhere to be found, but they did find an overwhelming amount of her DNA on a piece of duct tape and an air mattress in his barn. And adding to the creepiness is the fact that his property was literally plastered with recording devices. After checking his phone records and seeing that it placed him at the crime scene for 2 hours during the time that Sierra was missing, James was officially arrested. He was arrested on abduction charges, but at this point, Sierra was still missing, so all hope was that she would be found alive somewhere soon. But sadly, 3 days after she was reported missing, her body would be found buried in a shallow grave in a field just off of County Road 7. This was only a few miles away from James' property. She had been hogtied and had a large plastic toy shoved so far into her mouth as a gag that it broke her teeth. She was also found to be wearing an adult diaper. Sierra's official cause of death was asphyxiation caused by the large plastic toy, but there was no evidence of any SA. James was indicted on 19 counts for charges like aggravated murder and kidnapping, in which he pleaded not guilty. At the trial, it was revealed that he had been watching some pretty bad porn related to what he ended up doing to Sierra up until he committed the crime. It was found that James had passed Sierra on the road that day as she was riding her bike, and then during a crime of opportunity, he hid in the cornfield a little ways up the road and then attacked her as she rode by. He then struck her in the head with his helmet, knocking her unconscious. He then dragged her into the corn and waited until it was dark. Meanwhile, he called his brother to make up a fake story about his motorcycle breaking down, but little did his brother know that Sierra was fighting for her life right next to James while he was on the phone. He then rode his motorcycle home, drove back in a white van where he picked her up, and then took her back to his barn where he eventually killed her. One of the key pieces of evidence in this case, outside of the DNA, was a witness who had seen a white van speeding down that road the night of the abduction. It was reportedly speeding so much that the witness got a license plate number, which was found to be registered to James. His defense argued that all of the sexual things found in James' barn were props and part of a corn studio that he had planned to start. They said that although he did have a fetish disorder, he wasn't responsible for the murder of Sierra. Ultimately, with overwhelming amounts of both Sierra's and James' DNA found at the abduction site, as well as in his barn, paired with his phone records putting him at the crime scene, James was found guilty and sentenced to death. His current execution date is set for May 20th of this year. A big reason that he got that ruling is because his former abduction victim, Robin Gardner, spoke at his trial. She said that she knew deep down that she needed to be Sierra's voice because she is no longer here, and she knew that fear all too well. The only good thing that has come out of this is Sierra's law, which was started by her family in Sierra's honor. This law has created a violent offender database that is easily accessible to not just law enforcement, but to the public as well. This allows you to see if there are any violent offenders living in your neighborhood, which is extremely important because had this been around when Sierra was abducted, maybe things would have been different. At the time, even though James was a violent offender and had kidnapped women before, he wasn't in any state or federal offender databases. James was found to fit the profile of a serial offender, and police and even his own family believe that he could possibly have more victims. His family suspects him of killing at least 2 other women, but their remains have yet to be found. So as of today, he's never been officially charged with anything else. But this does make sense because in 2020, the FBI searched his property again. This time they brought in excavation equipment and dug everything up. This wasn't related to Sierra's case, so it makes me wonder what exactly they were looking for and if they ever found anything. Sierra's story is one that I will never be able to forget because it 100% could have been prevented.
This 19-year-old girl was found in literal pieces scattered around her town, and all she did was say yes to a date. Her name was Sade Robinson. She was was living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and just trying to navigate dating like any other teenager. And one day she matches with this demon, and I will not call him a man because men do not do this, but his name is Maxwell Anderson. And he tells Sade that he was around her age, but that was actually a lie because he was 33 years old. And after a few days of texting back and forth, Sade is getting no weird vibes from him. If anything, she's actually really starting to like this guy because he seems normal and sweet. So when he asked her out, she eagerly said yes, because why wouldn't she? She's about to go meet a cute guy her age for dinner. And on April 1st, surveillance footage shows Maxwell and Sade walking into this restaurant called the Twisted Fisherman, and they get seated. And from what everyone can see, things are going really well. She's smiling, chatting, acting very normal. Nothing about her body language suggests that she's worried or getting any bad vibes. In fact, it's going so well, they decided to go grab some drinks at this nearby bar called Duke's on Water, and they stay there for hours just talking and laughing like any normal first date would be. At around 9 p.m., security cameras catch them walking out the bar together, getting into her car. Not his, her car, and that becomes very important later, and then they head towards his apartment. Maxwell lived on the top floor of this duplex, and what happened in that apartment is truly horrifying, and it's something that we'll never fully know, but his phone tells us enough. This man had these disturbing photos of her. One of them was her laying on the couch face down and limp, and he's shirtless and she is clearly unconscious or worse. And after he was done doing God knows what to her, he waited until the next morning on April 2nd to try and secretly get rid of her body. He dragged her body into her own car and drove all the way to Warnemont Park. Surveillance footage shows the car circling around the same area multiple times, almost as if he was looking for somewhere discreet to get rid of her. And at around 4 a.m., Sade's phone location shows them arriving to another park. Maxwell drags her body out of the car, and for the next 2 hours, he stays there. And that's when he off her leg and threw it somewhere he thought no one was ever going to be able to find. Afterwards, he put the rest of her inside the car and drives to another spot that was really far from the park. My guess is he was trying to make it really difficult to even locate her body if he ever got caught, because if there's no body, then there really isn't a crime. He then drives to multiple spots around town, and from what we know, it was about 4 locations, but it could have been more. And at each location, he just cuts more and more of her off until she is completely unrecognizable. At some point, he then drives the car to another sketchy location and sets it on fire. He just walks away thinking he just got away with what he's done, but what he didn't know was that a witness happened to be there and saw this car engulfed in flames. They immediately called the police, explaining that they just saw a man get out of a car, toss a lighter into the front seat, and walk away like he didn't just set a car on fire. They said he was wearing a gray hoodie and a tan backpack, and later that morning, guess who was seen wearing a gray hoodie and a tan backpack? Maxwell Anderson, walking off the bus just a few blocks from his house like it's any other Tuesday. Around the same time, one of Sade's friends starts feeling like something is off. She's contacting Sade, but she's not answering her phone. And even worse, her boss found it very off that she didn't show up for work, because it's not like her to just do a no-show. So now people are really starting to panic, but before anyone could even file a missing persons report, it's already too late, because at 5:30 that evening, someone is walking through Warnemont Park, the same park that Maxwell just took Sade to hours earlier. So they walk closer and closer, and that's when they see it. It's a human leg just floating on the shoreline. I can't imagine just walking and seeing a leg. Like, what do you even do? Police immediately arrive to the scene and send the leg in for DNA testing, and unfortunately, it belonged to Sade Robinson. And because Maxwell was the last person to be seen with her, he was the last person to be driving her car, and now that same car is on fire, police quickly make a prime suspect. And on April 4th, they spot him in his car, they pull him over, and just like that, he's in custody. Inside his car was Sade's clothes and the same tan backpack and hoodie that was reported earlier by the witness. But this was just the beginning, because remember what I told you, the details are disgusting. That same day, police issued a search warrant for his home, and when they go inside, it is extremely clear that something happened here. They found blood on the walls in one of the bedrooms and all along the stairway to the basement. And in that basement, they find a literal dungeon. There were chains, restraints, blackout coverings for the windows. Like, it was built to hide whatever went on down there. And next to it all was 51 knives. And not your typical cooking knives. No, these were military grade, combat style tactical blades. We're talking hunting knives, machetes, serrated edges, the kind that you don't buy unless you plan on gutting something. Lock him up right now. They even find gas tanks, like more than one, which means that the fire wasn't some last minute panic. He planned this to the T. But while investigators are still processing this scene, more pieces of Sade are being found all around the city. I'm gonna spare you the gory details because I don't know if you're eating, but just know that they were found in ways that I don't even think you want to imagine. Oh, and I think what really got me was that before I did research on this case, I watched a video of him crying to the judge saying that he didn't do it. And at first, I'm like, oh, judge, he didn't do it. Y'all got the wrong man. But that was before I knew who he was. And now I know he for sure did this, and even his lawyers know he did it. Because look at the lawyer's face when Maxwell tells the judge it wasn't him. And in June of 2025, he is found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. So basically, this man will never walk free again. But let's be honest here, that'll truly never be enough because Sade should be here. I truly hope prison is the worst place for you, Maxwell. Thank you for sitting through this one with me. I know it was really hard to hear, but I love you guys. Mwah, group hug.
I wish I hadn't researched this case, but it's too late now. The information is burned into my brain. A man literally found a deceased teenage girl, and instead of calling the police like a normal human, he did just about the most disgusting, vulgar thing a human could do. Firstly, I'm so sorry I haven't been posting. I've been so unwell, and as you can hear, I'm still a little bit manly, but we're gonna give it a go today. I've finally kind of got my voice back, so I'm back and I apologize. Amber Niven and Connor Gibson were siblings who had quite a traumatic upbringing. Amber was 2 years younger than Connor, and the pair honestly saw things that no children should ever have seen. Their mum was a victim of DV at the hands of their dad, and he would regularly beat her up in front of the children. At one point, one of the beatings was so bad that she actually was rendered unconscious. Things got so bad in 2008 that thankfully social services had to intervene. This was after severe child neglect caused the children to lose so much weight that they were horrifically malnourished. This led both of these children to crime. They actually had to go out and steal food in order to just survive. Now, like I said, social services did intervene and they removed the children from the biological parents and placed them into foster care. This was with a couple in South Lanarkshire, and it finally seemed like the children were in a stable home. Amber ended up changing her surname to Niven in an attempt for kind of like a fresh start, but Connor decided to keep Gibson. Now, I suppose you might think that because these siblings had been through so much together, it might have actually brought them really close together and they would be kind of like an unstoppable unit. But actually the opposite happened. They kind of grew further and further apart. Now, despite what she'd been through, Amber was actually still really positive. She was a lovely girl. She loved the band Little Mix and was a loving, supportive friend to all who knew her. Her foster family said she kept us on our toes and had the most amazing outlook on life considering the suffering she'd experienced. But unfortunately, the suffering was not going to end there. Although Amber seemed to be adjusting to her new life quite well, Connor was a different story. He was being extremely violent and lashing out at school, and even making like disturbing threats to kill other students. Now, in June 2021, when I believe Amber was either 15 or 16 years old, she went to a house in Bothwell with a few people, just as teenagers do. I definitely did that all the time when I was younger. However, at some point during the evening, unfortunately while Amber was asleep, a 20-year-old called Jamie Stars did something horrific. He assaulted and AR'd her. Now, shockingly, this wasn't his first attack, and he'd also AR'd another teenage girl in the area a month prior. Now, thankfully, Amber actually did report this, even though it must have been so nerve-wracking to do, especially at such a young age. It's hard enough for grown women to report SAs and Rs, so fair play to Amber for actually having the guts to do this. She said to police, "The reason I think I was AR'd was that I woke up in a bed with no clothes on my bottom half, with a boy I had only met naked under the covers." She said, "I can't remember hugging him or kissing him at all." Other victim also reported the attack, and ultimately Jamie was put on the S offenders register and was given 10.5 years in prison. Unfortunately though, Amber would be murdered by someone else before she managed to see her attacker put behind bars. In November that year, Amber met up with Connor and thankfully did actually tell people that this was what she was intending to do, so her friends were aware of who she was with that night. The pair even took a selfie together, but things would quickly turn from siblings just catching up to cold-blooded murder. The pair were actually captured on CCTV that night walking in one direction, but a mere 2 hours later, Connor was then captured walking alone back the opposite way. So where had Amber gone? Connor was then tracked by cameras from Cadstow Bridge to the Blue Triangle, where he arrived just before midnight. CCTV then caught him having changed clothes, leaving his accommodation at 20 past midnight. He was then seen walking towards the bin area and could be seen carrying a bag with items inside. Days later, a horrific discovery was made. A local man in his 40s called Stephen Corrigan found poor Amber's lifeless body. Now, this should be the end of the tale. It should be Stephen ringing police, telling them this horrific finding, and then Amber's body being recovered. But things get far, far more sinister. Stephen saw her dead body, took her lifeless corpse, SA'd it, and dragged it into the bushes. His DNA was literally all over this poor girl's body, proving that he had abused her corpse. On the 28th of November, her body was finally recovered by police, and the evidence officers found was sickening. Amber had been lured by her brother to a remote area where he AR'd her and then murdered her. She had severe blunt force trauma, a broken nose, and had been strangled to death. Police found blood-stained clothing in a wheelie bin at Connor's accommodation. This poor girl had not only been murdered by her own brother after the pair had survived such absolutely horrific abuse growing up, and her then being a victim of a horrific S attack too, but a random member of the public, upon finding her dead body, was still not satisfied with letting Amber rest and SA'd her. Connor was ultimately jailed for life, and Stephen Corrigan was given just 9 years.
The shocking case of the killer grandma.
Is he alive? He's not? Oh, good. Oh, thank you.
In 2014, Cynthia was living with her daughter Laura and her son-in-law Jawad. Laura and Jawad have been married for the last 13 years, and they had a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old together, and Jawad also had 2 older sons from a previous relationship. It was a big family, grandma, mom, dad, and a bunch of teenagers all living together, but it was great for the most part, because there are some conflicting reports on the kind of man that Jawad was. Jawad was a successful real estate agent as well as a military man and a strict rugby coach. Some reports saying that he could be strict on his children, but at the end of the day, it came from a place of tough love. Jawad was a family man through and through, and he was only strict on his children because he expected and wanted great things from them. While other sources paint a much darker picture on the kind of man that Jawad was: mean, controlling, and abusive. One thing that we do know for certain is that Jawad and his mother-in-law Cynthia did not get along. They did not like each other. Their personalities clashed. Jawad was uptight and serious, and Cynthia was just a loopy, goofy grandma. The disdain that Cynthia felt for her son-in-law went much deeper than just a simple personality clash. No, Cynthia suspected that her son-in-law was physically abusive towards her daughter and her grandchildren. She would often see bruises on them, as well as Cynthia alleges that her daughter Laura confided in her that her husband Jawad was SA'ing her. This 13-year-long feud between Jawad and his mother-in-law Cynthia would all come to a head on February 11th, 2014, and that day was coincidentally Cynthia's birthday. That morning, the only 2 people in the house was Cynthia and Jawad, and they actually planned to go to Jawad's 13-year-old daughter's spelling bee together. But after Cynthia got ready and she went downstairs because they were about to leave, Jawad took one look at her and laughed. He did not like her outfit, and he did not want to be seen with her out and about. He told her that she could not wear that to the spelling bee. He laughed at her, he called her a hobo, and told her that she looked ghetto. And Cynthia snapped. She went upstairs, she went to her nightstand, she grabbed a firearm, and by the time she got back downstairs, her son-in-law Jawad was already outside because they were supposed to leave. He was standing by his car. His elderly mother-in-law stood in front of him and opened fire on him, just absolutely emptying the chamber of her weapon. And then Cynthia just calmly and coldly went and reloaded her weapon, and then she did the exact same thing again. Boom, 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 opening fire, shooting at her son-in-law. And remember, Cynthia
Cynthia is a grandma. She's older, she's slower. She walked with a cane most of the time. So she slowly walks over to reload her weapon for a third time. But miraculously, Jawad was still alive and he was able to crawl to the house and then lock Cynthia outside. So he's inside and she's outside, but with a weapon. And then she shoots off the lock of the door. So now Cynthia is back in the house, and again she just opens fire on her son-in-law. She shoots him over and over and over again, and by the time that she was done, she had shot Jawad 12 times. And multiple neighbors heard this brutal attack, and multiple neighbors called 911. When the police got there, Jawad was tragically no longer alive, and his mother-in-law Cynthia was already gone. She took off in her car to go celebrate her birthday. She went to Denny's to have breakfast, she went to the casino to go gamble, and was finally taken into police custody like 8 hours later at her favorite coffee shop. And after being taken into police custody, at first Cynthia tries to play a little dumb, but she eventually does confess, and once she confesses, she seems really happy with herself for what she did. This is one of the most bizarre police interrogations I've ever seen.
Something happened today at your house, and unfortunately, Laura's husband, you know what Laura's husband's name is? Well, unfortunately, Laura's husband has passed away.
Huh?
Laura's husband was killed today.
He was killed when?
Today. We're going to ask you some questions. We're going to ask you some questions because we're trying to figure out what happened today, okay?
Did you think of him? Why do you say that?
That's the big thumbs down. You didn't like him.
So mean to me and all of them.
He's mean to everybody?
Yes, he is.
Did anybody try to stop him?
Can't stop him.
It sounds like somebody had to stop him. Or
I did. I was guilty.
somebody had to stop him.
I did. Is he dead?
You tell me.
Gotta be dead.
You think he's dead?
I hope so. Is he alive? He's not? Oh, good. Oh,
The only time that Cynthia shows any emotion other than pure joy is when her daughter and her grandchildren enter the room, and these are people that have just heard that their mother or grandmother has just killed their husband or their father. They're devastated. Laura is absolutely devastating. She's crying. She just found out her mom killed her husband of 13 years that she's had 2 children with, and my heart absolutely shatters every single time I hear Cynthia's granddaughter talk to her grandmother about how her grandmother has just killed her father. Cynthia was charged with first-degree murder, and during her trial, she still showed no remorse, and she claimed that her actions were justified. Her daughter, Laura, so the victim's wife, even went on the stand and testified for her mother, claiming that her husband was abusive. But ultimately, the judge and jury on her case did not agree with Cynthia acting as the judge, jury, and executioner of Jawad, and Cynthia was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 50 years. So if Cynthia Sidbaka was ever going to be released from prison, she would be 116 years old. If you watched the end of this video, as always, I love you guys so much, and I hope you guys have a very, very safe and fun and happy Friday.
Here's the thing, I usually film in front of the window. I was sitting here, there's just something about the corner of a couch that makes me feel so safe. I was gonna get up to film, move to the window, and then I thought, I'm happy here, I'm comfortable here, and I would like to remain here. So here we are, remaining. Today's story creeps me out because it really puts into perspective how insane people can be. This student stalked his teacher for 15 years and then kidnapped her and her daughter and held them captive. Sit down. Mig Senshu was born in Taiwan, but his family moved to Minnesota in 1957 when Ming was only 8 years old. He was one of 3 boys. His parents were both well-educated people. They both worked at the University of Minnesota. He came from a good family. When he was only 11 years old, his dad tragically passed away. Ming, being the oldest boy, was now the man of the house, the head of the household. And Ming loved that, but he would make his 3-year-old and his 6-year-old little brother absolutely despise it. Ming treated his 2 little brothers as if their only purpose in life was to serve him. He would force them to greet him at the door. Every time time he got home, take his coat off, take his shoes off, make him comfortable, cook dinner for him, bring him the dinner, clean up after him, bring him a drink, bring him snacks, clean his room, make his bed, do this for him, do that for him, do absolutely everything. Ming did not want to have to lift a finger in his own house. Anything and everything he wanted, he expected his two siblings to do it for him, and if they didn't, well, he would hurt them. He would physically inflict pain on them. More often than not, he would use a belt to do so. And when the two little brothers would go crying and running to the mom would just say, too bad, Ming is the head of the household, so he makes the rules now. So little Ming sucks. He's disrespectful, violent, aggressive, and his own mom described him as someone having, quote, no feelings, like a dog. Teenager Ming, the older that he gets, he keeps all of those bad qualities, but then he becomes creepy on top of that. He starts peeking in people's windows because he loves to watch girls and women, but his favorite lady, female, to watch and obsess over, his biggest crush, was his own mother. Yeah, don't look at me, I'm confused too, I don't get it. In his teenage years, Ming grows a disgusting romantic interest in his own mother. He starts sneaking into her bedroom in the middle of the night, creeping into bed with her and putting his hand on her private places, if you know what I mean, going underneath the covers with a flashlight to look under her pajamas, and the times when the mom would wake up, she wouldn't really do much. She would just tell him to kind of go away, but she never did anything to punish him. Then at 14, Ming starts to get in trouble with the law because he started setting fires in people's apartments and he would throw rocks at people's cars. It's like you never really know what Ming is up to. You don't know what he's doing, but you know for a fact that it is nothing good. At 15 years old, Ming is a freshman in high school and he enrolls in an algebra class with a teacher named Mary Stauffer. And Ming would become, I don't even think obsessed is the right word, he was completely and utterly infatuated with Mary. He loved his teacher Mary, but for years when he was realizing that Mary was getting farther and farther away from him, he would put together a plan to kidnap her. Mary Stauffer was from Minnesota. She was happily married and she was working as an algebra teacher at the high school where Ming was a student. Mary was only 22 years old when she got this job, by the way. So Ming becomes obsessed with Mary in the same way that he was obsessed with his own mother, and it is worth it to note that his mother and Mary had a lot in common. They had similar mannerisms, they dressed similarly, they talked similarly, they had a very similar look to them. Neither of them really wore makeup, they didn't wear many accessories, they were both math teachers, they had a lot in common. So for the next 2 years, Ming devotes his entire life into Mary. Every second that Ming has, he is thinking and fantasizing about his teacher Mary. He would write stories about fantasies that he had about Mary, about them being intimate together, about him doing unspeakable and honestly revolting things to Mary. A lot of times in his fantasies, Mary would not consent to them. And I'm being serious when I mean he would write full-on detailed stories about this. And let's keep in mind that Ming is delusional. So in the back of his head, he thought that Mary felt the same exact way towards him, but that they had to keep it a secret. They couldn't do anything about it. So they, in his head, had this unspoken about attraction to each other, which was not the case, obviously. In Ming's head, that was it. The only thing that he cared about. He didn't care about anything else other than making sure that he had this future with Mary. But then time passed and Ming was now a senior in high school and Mary quits teaching. She quits and she moves to the Philippines with her husband to go work as a Christian missionary. Mary leaves the country. Ming graduates high school. He goes to university. He drops out of university and his mental health really declines. It goes downhill. He is isolating himself. He's socially awkward, still delusional, and only getting creepier and creepier. Fast forward to him now being in his 20s. Ming is currently living at his family house with his two brothers. His two brothers who still resent them for the way that he treated them when they were kids. His mother has now since remarried and she lives elsewhere. So he's at home. He's grown up. He's changed, I guess, a little bit, but the only one thing that hadn't changed, the one thing that was still at the forefront of his mind, was his obsession with his past teacher, Mary Stauffer, and his delusion that Mary was also in love with him secretly. Ming continued to write fantasies about Mary. Even though many years had passed, he would write the fantasies not only about Mary but also about other women. Ming documented his delusions in stories that centered around motherly figures, and in every fantasy Ming would write, he would have total control and power. A common theme in his stories were women that were teachers. The women often had a child and they would engage in sadistic violence behavior with a student, often to protect the child from harm. Ming's obsession with Mary is still progressively growing, and he decides that he needs to track her down. He needs to find the love of his life. He is searching through address books until he finds an address with Mary's last name. He goes to that house. He breaks into that residence in search of Mary, but he doesn't find Mary. Instead, he finds Mary's in-laws. He ties them up. He threatens to kill them with a weapon in hand and tells them that he would come back and find them if they ever reported the break-in. Mary's in-laws did in fact report the break-in, but of course they didn't know who Ming was They didn't even know his first or last name, so even though they reported it, the police couldn't really do anything about it. And it was then, for the very first time, that Ming found out that Mary was living in a different country, but he would continue to look for her for another 4 years. Time passes, years come and go, Ming's brother moves out, and Ming continues to isolate himself and wait for Mary. Now we get to 1979. Ming is around 29 to 30 years old. Mary is still in the Philippines with her husband, and they're now 2 children, but they were planning on coming back. They had plans to return to the States, and Ming found out about this, and he was over the moon. This is what he had been waiting for. Finally, the love of his life would come back after so many years. I'm sure you're not surprised, but when they came back, Ming began to stalk Mary and her family. He figured out where they were living, and he would watch outside, looming in the dark, in the shadows, watching from afar. He memorized the family's schedules. He started showing up where Mary was. He would watch her. He wouldn't approach her yet, but he was watching just from afar. So creepy. He would also watch the children, and he began to create what would be, in his eyes, the perfect plot to kidnap Mary. It wasn't until a year later when Ming heard that Mary had announced that her and her family were going to be making the move back to the Philippines when Ming thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it now. And he started preparing his home, specifically his basement, to kidnap Mary. He bought chains and attached them to the wall in the basement. He cleared out a closet, bought pillows and blankets for her, and then he tried to abduct her. The first time, Ming broke into Mary's apartment building. He made so much noise that the neighbors woke up and he got scared and ran off. The second time, the neighbors again caught him messing with the apartment building security system. He got scared and ran away. The third time, I don't know where in the building Ming was. He must have been in some sort of basement or something, but he drilled holes and then drilled and cut out a hole big enough on Mary's apartment floor for him to be able to poke his head in through the floor. And when he did, he was underneath Mary and her husband's bed, like his little head poking out of the floor underneath her bed, and they had no idea. Obviously, he didn't try to abduct her then because she was literally in bed with her husband, but how creepy is that? That's like literally my biggest nightmare. Now it is May 16th of 1980. Ming knew that Mary had a hair appointment, so he was looming around when Mary walked out of the salon with her 8-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. Ming approached them with a weapon aggressively. He was wearing a big black leather jacket and sunglasses, and he told them to get into the car, inside of Mary's car, and Mary and Elizabeth followed his instructions. Ming orders Mary to drive to a deserted area while he is holding the weapon to her daughter's head, and when they get there, without saying a word, he ties them up, blindfolds them, pushes them to the back of the car, and locks them inside the trunk. Mary remembers thinking, this isn't happening to me, what's going on, is this a dream? She was terrified, and she was begging and pleading with him when she said, please don't put us in the trunk, we won't be able to breathe. Do you need any money? I will give you whatever you want, just please don't harm my daughter. But Ming shoved them into the trunk anyway, and Mary and Elizabeth laid in the trunk face down praying together. Ming kept hearing them trying to move around or escape because Mary was trying to do what she could to try and loosen up Elizabeth's rope that she had tied around her, and Ming would listen to this and he would pull over, but each time he pulled over, he would only pull over to add more restraints in the forms of ropes and duct tape that included putting tape over their mouths so that no one could hear them. Earlier that day, Ming had parked his van in a parking lot that was across of a park. He was planning on transferring Mary and Elizabeth onto his van and then ditching Mary's car, but when he was getting ready to do so, he opened up the trunk to get Mary and Elizabeth out, but they started fighting back, and at the park across the street was a 6-year-old little boy named Jason. Innocent little boy that saw the commotion, and he walked over to see what was going on. Now, Ming has a lot of problems. First of all, he was not expecting to abduct both Mary and her daughter, but the daughter just happened to be with Mary, so now he kidnapped 2 people instead of 1. Second of all, he realized that Mary did not know who he was, because remember, in his head, he really was convinced that Mary was secretly in love with him as well, but of course, Mary was talking to him as if he was a stranger because it had been 15 years since he was her student, so Mary had no idea who he was. That was a massive issue for him. And third of all, he now has a 6-year-old little boy that is a witness that has seen the victims in his trunk, so what does Ming do? He panics, he grabs the little boy, shoves him in the trunk as well with Mary and Elizabeth, panics, and drives away. Well, the friend that was with Jason at the park saw everything happen, and he ran home and told his mom. A little hero that little boy was, because now the police knew that there was a man with 3 people in his vehicle, and the little boy was able to give them a description of the car. Ming, still in a panic, drove 30 miles away. It was then when he opened his trunk, he pulled out little Jason, shut the trunk, leaving Mary and Elizabeth in complete darkness and complete silence. We do not know exactly what happened next or how it happened, but we do know that Ming then unalived Jason and dumped his body in the woods. He then got back to his car, eventually went back to that parking lot, switched Mary and Elizabeth into his van, ditched Mary's car, and drove back to his house where he would keep Mary and Elizabeth a hostage for the next 52 days, chained up in his basement. Later that night and into the next morning, Ming brought Mary out into the living room and he told her her that she had ruined his entire life by giving him a poor grade in algebra class. It was then for the first time that Mary realized that Ming used to be a student of hers 15 years ago. Ming then violently essayed Mary for the first time, and this essay would continue throughout the next 7 weeks. Remember, Ming's whole motive was that he wanted Mary to be in love with him. He thought that she was in love with him. So he holds on to this delusion, and it turns into a fantasy that the three of them were going to be a happy little family one day. As time goes on, he would separate Mary and Elizabeth to minimize the chances of things going wrong. When he would go to work at his car repair shop, he would take Elizabeth with him, but he would lock her in a box in his van for 8 hours while he worked. Meanwhile, Mary was back at his house chained up to the walls in his basement, and to threaten them and to make sure that they feared him, he would repeatedly tell Mary that he would go after her husband and their son to end their lives should her and Elizabeth try to escape. Meanwhile, of course, Mary's husband had reported her and Elizabeth missing, and there was a search for them, including a search for Jason too, led by the FBI. Oh, also, I think I forgot to mention that Ming's little brother moved back into the house, and the brothers didn't really speak to each other much because they didn't like each other, but they were living underneath the same roof. And when Ming was away at work, Elizabeth and Mary thought that they could hear another person walking around. They thought that there was someone else in the house, and they were right, so they would bang on the walls to try and get his attention, but brother never paid any attention to it. Later on, he would say that he did hear strange noises, but obviously he had no idea that there was people tied up, chained up in his basement. By the way, throughout the entire thing, Mary kept such a brave face for Elizabeth. She was such a hero because even though she was suffering from living in a nightmare, she wanted to be brave for her daughter, and she was. Week 3 of them being held captive, Ming thinks, there's a job fair in Chicago that I really want to go to. Should I go to Chicago? Should I bring the 2 people that I have abducted across state lines and risk getting caught? Yeah, I think I should. I should do that, for sure. So he rents an RV, he puts cardboard on the windows, he ties up Elizabeth and Mary inside of the RV, and he makes the drive to Chicago. What the fuck? But unbelievably so, nothing happened. They didn't get caught, and they eventually made their way back to Ming's house. As time goes on, Ming is getting too confident, too cocky. He starts letting his guard down. He starts letting Mary and Elizabeth walk around the house, lets them take showers, lets them eat dinner with him at the dinner table. He lets them walk around. He buys toys for Elizabeth. He starts letting this fantasy of his dream life of them having and being a happy little family take over. Big mistake. Idiot. One day he gets too cocky that he allows Elizabeth to have one wish, and he drives her over to a payphone and lets her call her father for Father's Day. I cannot imagine what the dad must have been feeling. He's not heard from Elizabeth or Mary in weeks, and he probably assumed that they were no longer alive, and he picks up the phone and it's his little baby daughter saying, "Hi daddy, it's Elizabeth," and he goes, "Are you okay? Is mommy okay?" He was probably so relieved that they were still alive, but also petrified. Obviously, the conversation was very short. Elizabeth told him Happy Father's Day, and then she says, "We're fine, Dad. We can't talk anymore." The dad says, "When can you come home?" And Elizabeth says that she doesn't know, and the dad goes, "Can I talk to him?" And Elizabeth says, "No, I have to go," and then she hangs up the call. Unbelievable. Day 53 of being held hostage. It is now July 7th of 1980. Ming wakes up, and he tells Mary that he thinks that it would be a good idea if the 3 of them took a year-long trip together as a family, a road trip. And that day, when Mary heard that, she thought, this is enough. She knew that she needed to escape that day, or her and Elizabeth were going to be stuck with Ming for the rest of their lives, and they couldn't let that happen. She was ready to fight. That morning, Ming left to go to work, and both Mary and Elizabeth were at his house still in a closet, but in a different, slightly bigger closet. Mary starts looking around the closet, analyzing her options, and she decides that what she needs to do is take the door off the hinges. So she starts messing around with the hinges on the door. She's wiggling them around, trying to see if she can get them loose, and she can. She removes the hinges and then removes the door. Little Elizabeth was petrified. She didn't want to leave the closet because her brain had been trained to think that she needed to stay in the closet. She was so scared of Ming that she thought that he might come home, see that they were trying to escape, and they would get in trouble and he would punish them. Mary, being the most brave and courageous mom there is, convinced her that things would be okay. The 2 of them were able to get out of the closet, and weeks ago, Mary had found a receipt at the house that had Ming's address on it. She started to read the receipt over and over again until she memorized the exact address, and then she had Elizabeth memorize the address as well. A different time, when they were in Ming's van, Mary had seen a cop car with the police station's phone number written on it, and she memorized the number for the police station, and she had Elizabeth memorize it as well. So fast forward to now, July 7th, they are out of the closet, they're walking around the house trying to find a phone. They call the number that they memorized, it's the police, and they give them the address just like they had also memorized. Mary and Elizabeth snuck out of the house and behind some bushes behind a car as they waited for police to arrive. When the police finally got there, there, they see Mary and Elizabeth hiding behind the car, and they saved them. They were rushed to the hospital, and then they were taken to the police station for questioning. When Mary was talking to the officers, it was then for the very first time that she told them that she had not seen 6-year-old Jason Wilkman since they were kidnapped. And the cops had been searching for him for all these weeks, and they hadn't found him, so they both realized then and there that Jason was not going to be able to make it home because it was likely that he was no longer alive. And that was a heartbreaking realization. Mary and Elizabeth were reunited with the rest of their family, and it felt like a miracle because it really did feel like at one point they were never going to make it out of that scary house of terror. A group of officers showed up at Ming's ward to arrest him. He would be going to trial September 9th of 1980, but during the time that he was in prison awaiting trial, Ming tried to escape because he wanted to get out and come after Mary. He also tried to hire a hitman to go after Mary, and he tried to pay a prisoner that was getting out of jail to go after Mary when he was released. Luckily, all of his attempts failed. Ming was facing kidnapping and charges, and he pled not guilty. He was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. The following year, he was charged with the kidnapping and the murder of Jason Wilkman. During that trial, while Mary was testifying, Ming broke away from the defendant's table and attacked Mary with a makeshift weapon that he had managed to sneak into the courtroom. He was able to slash her face before he was pulled away by 6 men. The cut required 62 stitches to get repaired. He just does not stop. Ming accepted a plea deal with the police that he would show them and take them to where Jason's body was, but in return his charges would be reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree. Ming was found guilty for second-degree kidnapping and murder for Jason in 1981. For these crimes against Jason, he was sentenced to 40 years to be served concurrently with his federal conviction for his crimes against Mary and Elizabeth. He would become eligible for parole in July 6th of 2010, but he will remain in prison for the rest of his life because he has been a terrible prisoner, causes a lot of issues, and just doesn't know how to behave. So he's probably going to be in there for the rest of his life, which he deserves to be. I am very happy to say that Mary and Elizabeth are doing well. They have since then spoken out about their story, and they continue to be an inspiration for many people. Let me know if you guys have heard of this before and what you guys think. It's definitely a crazy one. I will say this from now on. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with TikTok. We don't know if it's going to get banned, but if it is, I will start posting these videos on my Instagram. So make sure that you are following me on Instagram so that we don't lose each other. My Instagram is in my TikTok bio. Anyway, love you guys so much. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I have filmed for 45 minutes. Yeah, this is gonna be a rough one to edit. Anyways, hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. I love you all so much, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
In December of 2014, a 24-year-old man named Aaron Frazier sat in the driver's seat of an excavator in the backyard of his childhood home in Jacksonville, Florida. Aaron was ripping out the backyard swimming pool of his old home, a home which his father had recently given him the deed to. But this property was not a nostalgic place for Aaron. In fact, he hadn't lived here since he was 3 years old, and the handful of memories he had from being in this place were basically all bad. His parents fought all the time, and then one day in 1993, his mom just decided to leave, and before long, Aaron was shipped off to foster care. So now he was kind of enjoying demolishing the property. By early afternoon, the pool was all gone. And so Aaron swung his bucket over to the outdoor shower that was located next to where the pool had been, and he dug the bucket into the concrete, and as soon as he did, immediately this geyser of water shot into the sky. And so Aaron knew he must have hit a water line. And so Aaron jumped out of the excavator, he turned off the water, and then he grabbed a shovel and headed over to the outdoor shower to inspect the damage. He basically needed to dig to see what exactly had been struck. And so with the shovel, he starts kind of moving away the mud and concrete, and at some point, the head of his shovel, the blade, it hits something sort of rigid and plastic. It was thick plastic sheeting like you would use in major construction projects. Curious why this sheeting would be underneath this outdoor shower, Aaron used a shovel and peeled away the plastic. As he did that, he began to notice that the sheeting was wrapped tightly around some sort of bulky object. And finally, he reveals the object, and it's this old coconut. Aaron was really confused by this. Like, why would somebody take the time to wrap a coconut in waterproof industrial sheeting and then bury it? And so as Aaron just sort of stood there wondering what this could be, he began rotating this coconut around in his hands. And when he saw the back of this coconut, he screamed. It would turn out Aaron's mother did not just suddenly abandon the family. On the night of January 6th, 1993, Aaron's mom and father got into this huge fight. It got out of hand, and Aaron's father shot and killed Aaron's mother with a .22 caliber rifle. Aaron's father then staged the murder to look like Aaron's mother simply stormed out and never looked back. Now, when the police investigated her absence, they did not believe Aaron's father's story. They thought there was something off about it, but there wasn't enough hard evidence to actually connect him to the crime. And so nobody ever caught him. But that all changed in 2014 when a court ordered that the deed of Aaron's childhood home be transferred from his father to him. The coconut that Aaron found in the backyard of his home was his mother's skull. He just didn't realize it until he rotated it and saw her eye sockets. 5 years later, in 2019, Aaron's father was convicted of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison.
Like I'm dead, you killed me, I'm dead now. Shut up, Deku! Boo!
This is TikToker Claire Miller, and in 2021, she stabbed her sister to death. So back in 2021, Claire Miller was your average 14-year-old girl. She was normal, she went to school, she had friends, and she posted a lot of videos on TikTok where she accrued a small fan base. There are even still pages to this day devoted to reposting her old TikToks and sharing them. But Claire had a dark side that nobody ever noticed. And that dark side would lash out in the worst imaginable way in 2021. So Claire had an older sister named Helen. She was 19, Claire was 14, and sadly Helen had cerebral palsy, which, as you know, is a debilitating disease. But for some reason, on February 2nd, 2021, Claire snapped. She grabbed a knife inside of her house and stabbed her 19-year-old sister, Helen, in the neck. Claire then called the police to turn herself in and was hysterical on the phone, claiming, "I killed my sister, you need to come here now." And when authorities arrived at her house, Claire was standing out front, she was covered in blood, there was blood in the snow, and her sister was found inside of the home with a knife still inside of her neck. Authorities have gone on the record after this murder and stated how this case is so unusual because it was a sister murdering her older sister, and Claire was so young when she committed this crime. She was only 14 years old. Now, obviously, Claire's parents were horrified to find out that this had happened. They not only lost one of their daughters, but they lost their other daughter too because she was then arrested. And even though her attorneys tried to get this case moved to juvenile court, that motion was denied. And even though after her trial it was found that Claire was mentally ill, she was sentenced to 12.5 years to 40 years in prison after a third-degree murder conviction. This story, once again, just goes to show that you can't ever really tell who a person is based on what they post on social media, because you could never tell by Claire's post that she was about to murder her own sister. I mean, just take a look at this final video.